Hello and welcome. Today, we're diving headfirst into one of the most mind-bending theories of consciousness out there. It's a theory that takes a question that sounds like a joke, is your toaster conscious, and treats it with absolute seriousness. So let's get into it. Right at the very heart of this whole thing is this incredibly bold statement from the theory's founder, neuroscientist Julio Tononi. Now look closely at the wording here. He's not saying consciousness comes from or is caused by integrated information. He is saying consciousness is integrated information. That's the whole ballgame. So let's start by unpacking that core claim. How does this radical idea actually work? All right, so information integration theory, or IIT, basically throws out the old idea that consciousness is some kind of spooky, mysterious ghost in the machine. Instead, it says consciousness is just a property of organization, something you can actually measure mathematically. And this leads to its most shocking claim. Consciousness doesn't care if it's running on brain cells or silicon chips. It's all about the structure, not the stuff it's made of. Okay, but if you're going to make a claim that huge, you better have a way to measure it, right? Well, that's exactly what IIT tries to do. It proposes we can actually calculate a consciousness score with a single number, and that number is called phi. Before we get to phi, we gotta understand this key phrase, integrated information. You know, think about it this way. A computer's hard drive can hold way more raw data than your brain, but it's just a collection of separate files. Your brain, on the other hand, every piece of information is woven together with everything else. That's integration. It's about how much the whole thing is truly more than just the sum of its parts. And to really make this stick, let's use an analogy we're going to keep coming back to. Picture consciousness as a giant, intricate spider web. The amount of consciousness is basically the web's structural integrity. A few loose threads, not very integrated, but a dense, complex, interconnected web, now you're talking. And this brings us to the symbol itself, phi, or phi. This is the official mathematical measure of that web-like quality. It's the number that IIT says represents a system's level of consciousness. So how on earth do you measure it? Well, conceptually, it's like this. First, you map out how every single part of a system affects every other part. Then you imagine going in with a pair of virtual scissors and cutting the connections between different parts. The more the system's overall integrity collapses when you make those cuts, the more integrated it was to begin with. That degree of collapse, that's its phi value. The cluster with the highest phi is the conscious part of the system. Now, this is a really important point. IIT doesn't see consciousness as a simple light switch, either on or off. It sees it as a gradient, a spectrum, with all sorts of different levels and qualities. Let's go back to our web analogy because it explains this perfectly. The quantity of consciousness, that's the how much, is like the overall size and complexity of the web. That's the phi value we just talked about. But the quality of consciousness, what it actually feels like to be that web, is defined by the specific, unique pattern of all the individual knots and threads. That unique pattern is your subjective experience. And this just spells it out beautifully. A human brain, with its trillions of connections, has an incredibly high phi value, a massive, dense web. A mouse brain, also complex but less so, has a medium phi, a smaller web. And then you get to something super simple, like a diode in an electronic circuit. Its phi value is absolutely tiny, but, and this is the kicker, it isn't zero. And that tiny, non-zero number, well, that leads us directly to the most mind-blowing and, for some people, deeply unsettling implication of this entire theory. Seriously, just pause and think about that for a second. If any system where the parts influence each other forms one of these informational webs, even a really, really small one, what does that actually mean about consciousness and the universe? It means this, panpsychism. The idea that consciousness isn't special, it's fundamental. It's a basic property of the universe, like mass or charge. According to IIT, any system with a phi value greater than 0 has some degree of experience. Even that single photodiode, all by itself, has a minuscule, primitive little flicker of what it's like to be a photodiode. So let's just hammer this home because it's the most important takeaway. Your brain isn't conscious because it's made of some special, squishy thinking goo. It's conscious because of the unbelievable complexity of the pattern of relationships inside it. At the end of the day, it's the pattern, not the parts. Now, I know an idea this wild might sound more like something out of a science fiction movie than a serious scientific proposal, but IIT isn't just a thought experiment. It's a major player in the scientific debate, so let's see where it fits in with other theories of the mind. So one of its main rivals is something called Global Workspace Theory, or GWT. If IIT's metaphor is that integrated web, GWT's is more like a global broadcast. Think of it like a spotlight on a giant stage. In GWT, consciousness is whatever information is currently in that spotlight, getting broadcast out to the rest of the brain. So where IIT focuses on the inherent structure of a system, GWT focuses more on the function of accessing information. And IIT isn't operating in a vacuum. Its ideas are actually being used by neuroscientists to measure brain complexity when someone is asleep or under anesthesia. It's even being discussed in the wild world of quantum physics, where some models are exploring if integrated information is fundamental to reality itself. The point is, this is a serious theory with really broad connections. And that really brings us to the final, ultimate takeaway. IIT suggests that consciousness isn't some magical spark given only to living things. It's a property of organized matter, woven right into the fabric of the universe. And if that's true, then your entire sense of self, every thought, every feeling, every memory, is just a unique and impossibly complex informational pattern. So the question the theory leaves us with is a really personal one. What intricate, unrepeatable pattern are you?